Next, we're going to hear from Deb Cunningham on the local perspective on and how to engage local schools on this issue.
Thank you, Susan. So in the winter, New York State ASBO convened a task force of 17 school business officials to thoroughly examine foundation aid and make recommendations for the 2017-18 legislative session. And as we were beginning to debate on this, we realized right away that this conversation was not just about more money, but using money in ways that will produce better results for our children, our workforce, and our economy. And we had been talking about GEA and restoring reductions to education for several years. That was really the mantra in school finance. So we realized that there was also a responsibility to restate the message of why we need foundation aid. And we also acknowledge that this is important because school aid is a legislative process. There is an interest, we heard of the state that just gives the school district what they got the year before. They don't even use the formula. We know that is part of it, and so the message that comes out is very important. So the business officials attempted to reframe that message and state what it is. And in a nutshell, it is the promise of school funding, opportunity for all. All children are entitled to the opportunity to a good education that prepares them for success in later life. And adults have a serious and important responsibility to ensure that all students have this opportunity. And if there was one thing that the task force was agreed about and passionate about, was that poverty has a profound impact on educational opportunity and success. We've heard a lot about that from our other panel members, but we acknowledge that the general public doesn't always appreciate this and doesn't see the need to put money behind poverty. But the researchers, the practitioners, the policymakers all realize that this is an important part of our school funding formulas, and that poverty should be incorporated in the formulas fully and accurately. And finally, and this was also mentioned in some of the remarks, educating all students benefits all of society, not just those children themselves, but through increased earnings and greater ability to work the jobs that we have and to find solutions for problems we need to solve. So some of you, this is the fourth year that the New York State Association of School Business Officials has put out an aid proposal. But some of you may not be that aware of that, and you must say, well, why are the school business officials doing an aid proposal? And I think that is a good question, and it deserves a good answer. The first is, this is what school business officials do every day. They look at the resources they have in their school district, and they maximize the resources to support the district's educational mission of educating all of the children in the district. They simply are looking at this for all the districts in the state collectively, taking a statewide perspective. Funding matters in education, and we know it's not the only thing that matters, but it is a key component, and it's almost often a catalyst for other key components like good teaching and leadership, professional development, instructional materials, facilities, etc. And finally, it has been almost a decade since the formula was put in place. So now the stakes are really too high to let the formula go unexamined. So we believe there is value in getting input from those on the front line, those who will actually implement the laws, take the money, and use it to achieve the outcomes that we want for our children. So these are the members of the task force. We took a lot of care to get diversity in the group. We have 7 people from high-need school districts, 5 from average-need school districts, 2 from low-need school districts, and 3 from BOCES. And we tried to get geographic and size diversity around the state. There were many more we could have included, but we wanted it to be as large as possible and still be manageable. And a number of them are here today. And if you would, I would just ask that if you're a member of the task force, you'd stand up for just a minute. So these folks contributed more than 12 hours of meeting time and many more hours of preparing for those meetings, reading materials, reviewing materials, sending in comments, and they did a magnificent job. And I would like to, this was a very thoughtful and informed group of people. I'd like to just take this opportunity to thank them for their contributions. One of the things we asked them was, you must be willing to assume a statewide perspective. You're not here just for your district. You're here for the whole state. They all did that in a fabulous way, and we are indebted to them for their work. So thank you for that. I'd also, while I'm thanking, I'd like to thank Mike Borges for his leadership with this project, and Kim Shannon for her able assistance in helping us keep up with the large volume of staff work that the project required. So we looked at a number of different documents, and I wanted just to point those out, and many of them are posted on our website. We had an annotated research bibliography where we looked at the research behind every, and we summarized what the research finding was so that someone could review it and get a sense of the research without actually reading every single one. We looked at a primer on foundation aid based on the laws of 2015, and when the 2016 budget was enacted, we looked very carefully at those changes and the distributional impacts. We looked at background and research and alternatives related to a number of areas that were significant for foundation aid to ensure that we had a thorough review. These included cost studies, the cost of providing a sound basic education, weightings for students that need extra time and extra help, equalizing aid for local school district fiscal capacity, and how we assess the expected local contribution in the foundation formula, and accountability for school resources, regional cost differences, and phasing in the formula. Okay. So the task force identified 3 goals, and they organized their recommendations around these 3 goals. The first was equity, and in terms of equity, we were thinking of 2 different things. First, providing additional funds for students that need extra time and extra help. And secondly, to compensate for the ability to raise revenues locally within the confines of the tax cap. Adequacy is the funding level needed to provide all students the opportunity to succeed with state learning standards. And stability means funding is stable and predictable to allow for long-range planning. It's also sustainable within a defined phase-in period, regular updates to the cost study, and inflationary increases between studies. So those were the 3 goals. And after a thorough review of all of this detail, the task force concluded to stay with the foundation aid formula, the basic foundation aid formula, as a major accomplishment in New York State school finance, but to improve upon it and to adapt it to current needs and conditions. So my colleague Suzanne Slack, I just went back to SED days, is going to talk to you about the recommendations of the task force. Thank you.